Welcome to the next episode of Arena Goat Talk. I am your host, EJ Burt, talking some ball here with one of Arena Football's own, Mr. Tom Luginbill. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, EJ, man. It's good to be on with you. It's been a long time.
All right, I appreciate your time and you coming on and talking some ball with me and, letting everybody know about you and kind of what you got going on.
Well, I'll tell you, man, when you first reached out to me, because you came up as a player around the same time I was coming up as a coach in the Arena Football League. It brought back so many different memories, man. AF2, um, the AFL, expansion franchises, just all of it, man. And so, I kind of gnashed my teeth as a player first for the first 2 years, and then got into coaching in NFL Europe, went back into the Arena Football League into coaching, then went back into the XFL, into the outdoor game. So I kind of just went back and forth, in and out. And then really my last go around, I was the head coach at Detroit, and we had a major turnaround. It looked like things were going to be going in the right direction. And then boom, the franchise folds. And that
Mm-hmm.
was when I made a decision. All right, am I going to stay in this, or am I going to get into some other areas? And so I got into player personnel and pro personnel full time, which ended up leading into my job here now at ESPN, which I've been with for the last almost 21 years.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, I remember the Detroit days and seeing what you guys had going on up there, and they say that you stick around arena ball long enough, you'll experience situations where teams folded and whatever the case
Oh
may
yeah,
be. I've made it all my years, and it wasn't until 2 years ago where I had my experience with that, and yeah, that'll change your mindset as far as what you got going on with the arena and what the plan is.
yeah. Well, especially at that time, because, and you'll recall this, but like I kind of had a unique stretch, because when I got into the Arena Football League as a player, it would have been the spring of 96 and 97. And that was at, just the height of pre-player association arena football, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
like quarterbacks were making maybe $1,000 a week, the $250 win bonus, I think it was. Maybe some of the upper tier quarterbacks were making a little bit more than that, but not much. Then other people were maybe making $500 to $700 to $800 a week with the win bonus. And you had the little contract on ESPN2, so the games were televised and all of this and that. And that's kind of how I started. And then when I went out of the league and then came back into the league as a coach and went out and came back, by the time all that happened, it had morphed into a full blown, salaried, make a living on a year round basis, depending on who you were,
mm-hmm,
type of league. Now,
mm-hmm,
looking back on it, as we all know, the whole entire thing was a house of cards, because when
mm-hmm,
you're selling franchises for 12 to 13 to 14 million dollars that are losing $3 million a year, the math's
mm-hmm,
not adding up.
mm-hmm.
So you could see, and this was from like 2002 to 2004 or 5 was the taking off of the CBA, and high player salaries, benefits, health insurance, all of that stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
was great for everybody if you were in that little window for about 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you knew anything about economics, you knew it wasn't going to last very long, and it was going to come crashing down. I mean, because when I got back into it was the either first or the second year of the CBA, and it was when I went to the Dallas Desperados. So Jerry Jones hired me. I was coming out of the XFL in 2001, and we had won the championship at Los Angeles in the XFL. The XFL folds. I still have a year left on my contract, and all of a sudden, word gets out that Jerry Jones is going to start an arena football franchise, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that kind of sounds interesting. I'd like to be interested in doing something like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I made a couple of overtures to some folks, and I was in a position at that time. I was 27 years old, but prior to that 2001 season in the XFL, I was the head coach at Tennessee Valley in AF2, and I was 25 years old. And I was doing everything. And I'm talking from ordering shoelaces to player personnel to coaching the offense, the quarterbacks, the receivers. I was a director of football operations, you name it. So, like, it was, trial by fire, thrown into the deep end. So we go and we play in the arena championship that year in AF2. We lose to Quad City. The next year I go to 2001. We win the XFL championship. And now all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, okay, well, what am I going to do next? And
Mm-hmm.
that was when I started to make some overtures to Dallas, and I ended up getting the job. It was a unique situation because I was doing player personnel for the Cowboys in advanced scouting during the NFL season, but at the same time, building the expansion franchise of the Dallas Desperados, because Joe Avisano, who's the special teams coach of the Cowboys, was our head coach. And then I was brought on to run the personnel and coach the offense. Then I went out and hired Will McClay, if you
Mm-hmm.
remember Will
Yeah.
McClay,
Yeah, he's there now,
who
ain't
who ironically is the director of player
he? Yeah.
personnel for the Dallas Cowboys to this day. Um, and then we all just kind of put the whole thing together, and as an expansion franchise, which it's not easy to win in year one, and we did that. We made the playoffs in year one. It was a lot of fun, and what a great experience. And so, yeah, man, I look back on those times as like character building times, having to do it the hard way, early on, not making a lot of money. Like, I remember when I got hired at 25 years old to be the head coach in Arena Football 2, I was getting paid $37,500, and I thought I was wealthy. Man, I had I had just come out of I had got my grad degree. I had been doing NFL Europe. I played for a couple of years in the Arena League, so I was chunking money away. I was a scholarship quarterback in college, so I came out of college. I had no debt. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
anybody anything. I was single. I'm like, man, this is the greatest job I've ever had in my entire life. This is unbelievable. And then I had the opportunity to go back to the outdoor game that following year, and I went to Los Angeles in the XFL, and I was making $45,000 as a position coach, and
Mm.
I was making 37.5 the year before, having to run the whole dang thing. Um, and then I go from the XFL to Dallas, and it just kept, moving along the line. But man, what great memories! That I wish today's football fan, and not people our age or older, but like today's football fan that is really into college football or really in the NFL now, that's like age 35 or younger, got a chance to experience like the Arena League from like 1995 to 2005, 2006,
Mm-hmm.
right? That
Mm-hmm.
that era was when you had the best players, the most attention, the best home crowds, great venues.
Mm-hmm.
That was an era. That 10-year, 11-year span there was awesome.
Mm-hmm. So when you first heard of arena football, like what was your impression of it? And once you got, involved with it, what was what did you think about it?
So, I knew when I got done playing college football. I mean, I was a 4-year starter, and I played a lot of quality football, but I knew I wasn't going to be an NFL guy or a CFL guy. And I had kind of grown up later years of high school, and probably into my junior college years, early 90s, was like the first 5 or 6 years of the league, right? And
Mm-hmm.
at that time it was like the Denver Dynamite, right? The Arizona
Mm-hmm.
Rattlers, the Tampa Bay Storm, um, Pittsburgh Gladiators, I think. I mean, some of the old original
Mm-hmm.
teams. Um, so I was familiar with it. And to be honest with you, EJ, like, I wanted to play a couple of years afterwards if I could do it in the Arena League, because I wasn't looking at some long term solution to play. I wanted to pay for my grad school. So I wanted to go get a master's degree, because I was working for my dad in NFL Europe and player personnel, and trying to kind of get into coaching as a quality control guy at the same time going to grad school. And I'm like, okay, well, I can pay for my grad school while I'm playing. So I played my rookie year with the Texas Terror, and they were in Houston. I played my second year with the Florida Bobcats the first half of the year, and the Orlando Predators the second half of the year. And then I got past that time, and the next year, I got hired by the head coach of the New York City Hawks.
Mm,
This would have been 1997, 98, somewhere 98. It would have been 98. And that was my first like full time coaching gig. I think I was making like $17,000 a year with, as we know, with your free housing and your meal deals, all the
mhm.
little perks that we used to think were a big deal, right? And so yeah, that was like my earliest memories of it. But I just always thought the game was so cool because it was so unique, right? The
Mhm.
skill set, the skill sets that you had to have to be able to not only thrive but survive in that league. I mean, you had to be a uniquely gifted athlete with a
Mhm.
well-rounded set of skills when you're having to play on both sides of the ball and you're playing in that crackerjack box and it's like basketball on astroturf and you don't have a run game, right? So everybody's pinning their ears back and coming after the quarterback. And ironically, it's interesting because when my last time in NFL Europe was 1998, and guess who we had at quarterback? Kurt Warner. So I'm in training camp, and Kurt Warner and Jake Delhomme are our two quarterbacks battling to be the starter.
Oh.
And so I remember Kurt Warner saying to me when we were just shooting the breeze prior to practice one day, we're out there on the field, and he said, "You know what, man?" Because he knew I had just gotten done playing for a couple of years, and we had kind of known each other a little bit. And he goes, "You know what, man?" He said, "I didn't realize this at the time I was playing in the Arena League, but now that I'm back in the outdoor game, the game has slowed down. The space and the field is so big to me now that everything feels like it's moving in slow motion." And I hadn't
Mhm.
really given that any thought. And because in that league, at the quarterback position, you better be tough, you better be able to get the ball out of your hand, you better be able to change arm angles, and you're going to take shots and you're going to have to throw into windows that are this big, right?
Mhm.
And so the guys that got really, really good in that league were really good at that. Graziani was great at like that. Andy Kelly was really good at that stuff. Jim Kubiak. Did you play with Jim in Georgia? Did you play with Jim Kubiak? I thought
I
you might have.
I played against him when he was
Okay.
in Georgia. I feel like he was when he was in Dallas. I might have played against him,
Yeah, you might
but
have then.
when I went to Philly,
Uh huh.
he was offensive coordinator.
Oh, was he really? Okay, got it. Got it. All right. So yeah, like some of those guys that got really, really good were just really accurate, got the ball out of their hands quickly. So Kurt Warner says that to me. So that's 98. Fast forward to 2001, and I'm the quarterbacks coach at Los Angeles in the XFL. This is, 4 years apart, two completely independent conversations. And we're going through our player evaluations to get ready for the XFL draft. And Tommy Maddox, the former UCLA quarterback, was playing in the Arena League at New Jersey. And the year he played there, they weren't very good. And he was just getting pummeled. I mean, just bam, bam, bam. But he kept getting up and he kept getting off the turf and he kept firing back. And I'm like, okay, maybe this guy's got something. He's a former first rounder. We're in Los Angeles. He went to UCLA. There could be some things at work here.
Mhm.
So lo and behold, we decided we draft him, we bring him in. We're in training camp out there on the practice field. And we start talking arena ball. And he goes, "You know what, dude?" He goes, "You know what I've realized is this game is really slowed down." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Having those couple of years in the Arena League and everything's confined and you're in this crackerjack box, we got to get the ball out real fast into tight windows." He goes, "Now everything's all spread out and I feel like there's all kinds of space and all this and that." And I'm like, "Dude, Kurt Warner told me that exact same thing in 1998." And it's really true. It's really
Mhm.
true. In that league, at the quarterback position, when you think about it and you go back to the outdoor game, it really makes a lot of sense.
Mhm. When you were playing quarterback, like walking up to the line of scrimmage and sending your guy in motion, looking at the defense, well, in your experience and everything, what, I guess kind of talk about that, that thought process.
Well, I knew one thing, the thing in the Arena Football League, especially at that time, is like a lot of teams were very, very competitive, but then there was a handful of teams, as you know, that were just better than everybody else, right? And they were generally better than everybody else because they had better people up front. They had guys like you, or they had two or three or four of them, right? So the first thing I remember, just as a player, and then later as a play caller, is just being aware of getting the ball out of your hand on time. Like when you set the guy in motion, whether we were coming across the formation or we were going up back motion towards the line of scrimmage, like knowing where your outlet is right away in case you didn't, where you knew you were going to be under duress and you had to dump the ball off, and knowing, hey, do I have an advantage with my motion guy lined up against who that defender is? If I get this look, I think our guy's better than that guy. And
Mhm.
really no different than the outdoor game of trying to identify matchups and weaknesses and where you can take advantage of people. But I was always very cognizant because I was marginally talented, marginally. Um, but I could get the ball out on time and I had quick feet. And so I knew that I could protect myself by getting through the process really, really quickly. And that's why I tried to do. And then ironically, I went through 4 years of college, started every game I was eligible for, and never missed a game doing injury. And then halfway through my rookie season, I come right down, falling through on a ball, and lo and behold, boom, right on a defensive lineman's helmet, bust my thumb all up. I'm on the IR the rest of the year, and that was frustrating because that had never really happened to me before. But again, trying, people in your face all the time. The thing in the arena league, like it's not like outdoor game where you can turn around and hand the ball off and take some pressure off you, right?
Mhm.
You can turn around and control the line of scrimmage and play past people and this and that. And you really don't have that. I mean, you have it to a certain degree, but you can't live on it.
Mhm.
It's more of an offset or a staple within the offense that a little different wrinkle. But yeah, my whole thought process is where's my matchup, where's my outlet, how do I get rid of the ball out of my hand quickly?
Mhm. Yeah, just um, when I became a head coach in arena, I had to think about what the quarterback sees, what the offense is looking for, and all that stuff. So I got to see the game from a whole nother light that I never had to think
Yeah,
about. All I had to think about was getting to the quarterback and making sure he was worried about me as opposed to getting rid of the ball and trying to make that motion man work against them, even though it worked
yeah.
for them. I tried to time up the motion, all that. So now being a head coach, I'm trying to how do I make this offense work and everything, and trying to figure out what quarterbacks, you guys would be
Yeah.
thinking. 'Cause I never had to think like that. So that was like a whole nother thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that. When you become a coach, you get into coaching. And my first foray as a head coach was at 25 years old. And so what I did is I purposely brought in two guys that were 25 years older than me because I knew I was going to be looked at as the young punk, and I needed some older elder statesmen that would have my back, that had coached a lot of football, and then it was my job to teach them the arena game. I knew they
Hmm.
knew football, they knew technique, they knew how to coach positionally and all of that, but I had to be in a position where I had older guys that people would respect, and then I would teach them the game. So like I found that as much football as I learned from them, they learned a lot of football from me because it was a totally different game. And I remember that first season, um, in the first game ever, the kickoff game of the first ever game in the history of AF2 was year one, 2000, and it was us against Birmingham in Birmingham, and packed house, 16,000, right? And I had a bunch of guys on the team, as did every other team in the league, that had never played arena football before, right? So, like, you're not just teaching the coaches, you're teaching the players what it's going to take to do this. And the
Hmm.
one thing that it takes in that league is a distinct level of conditioning because you have small rosters and everybody's playing on both sides of the ball. And I was really hard on our team in training camp, and I was like, guys, you just got to trust me. You got to trust me. I know this is hard, and I know I am pushing you, and you are looking at me like I got three heads. but you're gonna have to trust that why I'm doing this. When we get into that first game, you're gonna figure out why.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate because we got into that first game and we beat Birmingham like a baby seal. It was like 63-18 or something like that. I mean, it was
Mhm.
really bad. And they couldn't get, they were in the second quarter and they were sucking wind so bad
Mhm.
that they could barely get out of their stance. They had no pass rush. And then we were just, whoom, whoom, whoom. And as a young coach, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because when that moment happened and we got back into that locker room, the guys were like, I get it.
Mhm.
Now I see it. Now I understand.
Mhm.
And then we went on to, have a hell of a run and play for the championship that first year. So just a lot of like just great, great memories. But one of the points I tell that story is obviously you got to be in great condition to play this game, but the arena game's a different game, right?
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
is a different game. It's got to be coached slightly different. It's got to be addressed slightly different. It's got to be conditioned differently. You have to be able to massage small rosters. That's not easy to do, as you know. So, but all great experiences, particularly for somebody like myself who was young, really young.
Mhm. Definitely. So you talked about that first year, right, of coaching. Kind of, what was that transition like? You're done playing. I think you touched on it a little bit from playing to all
Mhm.
right. I'm going to get into coaching, and then like I guess talk some more into that whole process for people who don't know what that is like.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity. I grew up the son of a longtime college coach, and I'd been around it since I'd been in a locker room. I knew that I wanted to get into coaching my entire playing career, high school, college, what have you, and then I had an opportunity to continue to play, like I said, and pay for my grad school, but also get involved in the outdoor game in NFL Europe at the time. And one of the coaches on our staff the year after he gets hired as the head coach of the New York City Hawks, and he's the one that hired me and gave me my first job. But when I say it was my first job, I had a job, but I was like a part time
Mm-hmm.
seasonal guy. This was going to be a year round deal, and I was going to coach the receivers and the quarterbacks and call the offense. And I hadn't been a play caller before, and I think I was 20, 23, 20, going on 24. And I don't know if you remember this name, but there was a quarterback in the Arena League for a number of years that was really, really good. His name was Mike Perez. And Mike would have played like in the like 1990 to 98 era where like he was in the top two or three players in the league. Like
Was he like an athletic
no,
improviser kind of guy?
no, pure pocket guy, like
Okay, okay,
Jay Gruden type guy.
okay. Thinking of another
He
guy.
played at San Jose State, but he was the longtime quarterback of the Albany Firebirds. And
Okay.
then the Albany, if you remember, brought on Mike Pulowski as his
Hmm.
backup, and then they decided to go with Pulowski, let Perez go. New York signs up. I end up being his coach there,
Okay.
and boy was I in for a rude awakening, dude, because he was near the end of his career, super set in his ways. Uh, in most instances, had all the answers, right? And at that time, being young and inexperienced, I probably thought I did too. And we initially we were like oil and vinegar, man. And it was not good. And I look back on it now as being something that helped me grow and develop and learn how to adjust
Hmm.
and maybe come up with a different perspective, come up with a different way of doing something, coming to a common ground with a player as opposed to my way or the highway. He was a lot older than I was, and it's hard to coach older guys when you're a younger guy, right? And
Hmm.
so um, it was not a successful year on the field for us as a franchise. It was actually one of the first times that I had been involved in like non-successful football outcomes, like on multiple occasions.
Hmm.
It was a great learning experience for me, but that was my transition from a player to a coach, where like something really that I was in charge of, or that I was responsible for, was failing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when I had been in NFL Europe, I was working with the tight ends. I was strictly dealing with the position. The year before, I was with the receivers, strictly dealing with the position and doing personnel in the offseason. But this was something that there was, an expected result from the offense, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't handle that overly well. And then I'm in between jobs. So now I've got a real taste of, okay, this isn't going to work. And so I got to know, just through the years of being involved in the league, Pat Sperduto.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat Sperduto had been doing a really nice job as the head coach of the Nashville Cats. And Nashville had gotten really big in the league. They were really successful, great draw, a lot of support. And he knew I was between jobs, and he said, "Hey, listen, why don't I got an apartment? Well, come on down to Nashville." He goes, "I know you just finished grad school. I know things didn't end the way you wanted to in New York, but come on down. How about you work with our special teams?" And he goes, "I want you to come down and coach our special teams." So, not making anything, as most people in the league weren't at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I said, "Okay, so I'm just going to go down and I'm going to coach the hell out of the special teams." And I had been involved in special teams, but not operating the special teams before.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, and having to kind of do it the hard way, not really making any money, trying to figure out what my next step was, between the end of that season and the next fall, which would have been the spring of 99 into the fall of 99, Pat calls me in and he's like, "Hey, listen," he goes, "You heard about this Arena Football 2 thing that's going to start?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you're going to have some opportunities there. I've had some calls, and if you're interested," he goes, I honestly think, with your background, your experience, they're looking for guys that know the game, and you've done our special teams. You were just a coordinator. You had uh, been in the league as a player. If something comes up, man, you need to really think about it, because it would be one of those scenarios where you're not going to make great money, but you're going to actually have every job within the organization. And as a young coach, it couldn't be a better opportunity."
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, within the next 2 weeks, I interviewed for 3 or 4 different jobs and ended up taking the job at Tennessee Valley. And it ended up being probably the best decision I made at that time, because of my age and my lack of experience of having to do everything and build the organization from the ground up. And it ended up being a hell of a deal, man. I had a run where we played for the AF2 championship my first year there. We won the XFL championship with an expansion franchise the next year. Left the XFL, started another expansion franchise in Dallas, and made the playoffs. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then following that, I had an opportunity to turn around, or try to help turn around, the Detroit franchise after my first year in Dallas. And they had gone 1-13 in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
We came in, and at that time, we had the single biggest win ratio turnaround in league history. We actually went to the quarterfinals of the playoffs the very next year. All right. And then the following year it folded. So it all came to an end. Arena football in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. So, what was that transition like when you went from arena to XFL to NFL? What did that feel like, planning wise, etc., as a coach?
Well, obviously, with the outdoor games, schematically, there is just so much more going on, and there is so much more that you've got to become a student of, and really hone your craft, and particularly in the pass protection area, if you're coaching offense. Obviously, it's overly simplified in the Arena League in terms of what you can do, and the numbers, and the rules, the way they were set up. So it was probably pretty good for me to kind of do that in and out type of thing, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of get a sense of, okay, what do I want to get into long term here? Um, but it was a whole lot more work just on the day-to-day theory of the game, the day-to-day film breakdown, the 3 or 4 game breakdown that you're doing on somebody, because in the Arena Football League, at a 50-yard field, it's 28 and a half yards wide. There you go. They're going to be in 2 or 3 different formations, maybe a couple of little exotic things here and there. There's rules on defense of what everybody can do. Then
Hmm.
you go into the outdoor game, and it's anything goes. There aren't rushing rules, there aren't blitzing rules, and you've got hash marks and down and distance, and um, you know plus territory, minus territory, and you have a lot of data that goes into putting together your probabilities in those areas. So there was a lot more breakdown that goes into that side of it, and still to this day, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, which was good for me because it allowed for me to not just get in that arena football mode and not be in a position to learn more about the game, because there's a lot more that you have to learn about the outdoor game than there is the indoor game.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something that not everybody's had the opportunity, the blessing to be able to coach the different leagues, observe the differences between, and have like some good experience to be like, yeah, there's this, compared to that, and there's these things that you can do in arena that you can't do in an arena, or you can't do in XFL or
Yeah.
NFL. People can talk it all day, but not many people have that experience.
Yeah. Well, I remember. How about this one, AJ? So, in the arena football, you could have one receiver going in motion, right, towards the line of
Hmm.
scrimmage. Well, back in the original XFL in 2001, we had that rule too in the outdoor game. You could
Mm.
bring a receiver for only one at a time. But if you remember, in the Arena Football League, what could you not do with that player? You couldn't hit a defensive lineman, right?
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
the XFL, you could. So, on the quarterback's coach, our coordinator had come from Canada, where you have everybody moving towards the line of scrimmage. But he goes, how do we want to incorporate this? And I said, well, what are the rules? Like, who can we block? Who can we not block? I said, because in the Arena League, you can't block a defensive lineman with that. I said, are we allowed to do that here? So that's what we found out first. And then when we found out that we could do that, that was when the run game started taking place. Because now we're bringing guys over in motion, downhill, crushing the defensive end, pulling the tackle, blocking down with the guard, pulling the center, and I mean, it was downright dangerous.
That's a hell of a crack right there.
Oh my goodness, right? Oh my goodness. And then if you did it enough, it even if you weren't gonna get him, he thought you were, so
Yes.
that he'd be a half a beat off the ball and he'd be late, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, we found some really fun, unique ways. Like, we would get in a triangle bunch formation really close to our tackle, and we'd bring a guy over or up and down, and then we'd split him between 2 guys, and we'd block the linebacker right up that's head up on the guy in the line of scrimmage, and then we'd toss sweeper. We just came up with ways to try to implement it. But yeah, those were interesting concepts that we were able to use. I mean, I look at that now, like, I can't believe we did that. Like, I can't believe it was allowed, right? And so, but boy, we used it to our advantage when we could.
I can't imagine being that defensive end,
I know.
and if you get cracked and you looking back at the linebacker, why ain't y'all tell me? You know what I mean? You looking for all kind of help. Or if you gonna crack me, then you got to do something. Like, I can't imagine what that's like.
Oh, I know it, man. We had some fun with it, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So, um, fast forward to what you're doing now. You touched on that as well a little bit, but kind of how did you transition into you work with ESPN?
Yeah. So, when Detroit folded in 2004, it would have been late July, early August. The season had just ended, and at the time when I had taken the job in Detroit, I was had gotten hooked up with a scouting service company that we used when I was working for the Cowboys and the Desperados, called Scouts Inc. and I was doing some like just some contract work on my own for them in the off seasons, and I was doing player personnel evaluations for NFL free agency, and then those evaluations would go to clients that at Scouts Inc. we had in the NFL that utilized us as like a supplemental approach to player personnel to supplement their in-house personnel department. So, so I was doing that. So then the league folds, and my wife and I were thinking about we've only been married for a couple of years, and we're thinking about starting a family. And so, I really gave a long. I really had a couple options: stay in the Arena League and go somewhere else, get out of the Arena League and get into personnel, or get out of the Arena League and go back into the outdoor game. But at this point, it was July and August, and the cycle for the outdoor game wasn't going to come open until late December, in January. So I had to come up with something to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the guy I was working for at Scouts Inc. at the time, he goes, "Hey, listen," he goes, "I think I can get you through the next 2 to 3 months and allow you to be able to find out, figure out what it is you want to do." And he goes, "And you may find out that you really like doing personnel, and it gives you some stability and some freedom." And so that's what I did. I literally sat in my office. I was in home. I lived just outside of Huntsville, Alabama. Um, and I had a setup just like a coach's office, and I would just sit and I would watch tape all day, and I would write player evaluations and projections on NFL free agents. And at the end of each week, I would have to turn in a certain amount of evaluations that would go out to the client. So I did this for like 4 straight months. Well, um, the our group Scouts Inc. also had some private contracts with ESPN at the time to do behind the scenes work for on-air television presentations. So I don't know if you're old enough to remember like the old Edge NFL matchup show with Ron Jaworski and all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd get up there and they'd break down the play and it would be all drawn up and this and that. Well, our group were the ones that were putting together those breakdowns, and then they'd take them and break them down on TV. So we were like a kind of behind the scenes X's
Mm-hmm.
and O's type of deal. But I wasn't doing anything for ESPN at that time. It was just another part of our company that we were in business with. Well, turns out the the guy that I was working for, somebody at ESPN comes to him and says, "Hey, listen," he goes, "We're thinking about getting into player personnel and pro personnel and covering high school recruiting, and we'd like to do it the way you guys cover college and NFL for us. Do you have somebody you think could do this?" So, guy I'm working for comes to me, he goes, "Hey, you interested in doing this?" And I said, "Well, are we talking about like a full time gig?" He goes, "Oh yeah, full time gig." And he goes, and he said, "If you say yes, I can't have you bailing on me in 2 or 3 months." He goes, "That we would have to build this thing from scratch." And so I was like, all right. I hadn't been involved in college or high school football ever in my profession. I've been coaching and scouting for 11 years, but hadn't been in that part of it. But I'd grown up the son of a college coach. I'm familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of just started this new kind of avenue of my career. Now, little did I know this job was exclusively digital, meaning that I was doing this for ESPN.com. There was no television, there was no radio, none of this stuff. So I'm perfectly happy just being the behind the scenes guy. We're going to figure out how we're going to rank players and how we're going to apply our logic and our pro personnel model and apply it to the 17, 18-year-old kid. Well, and so much of professional life and the career you get into is timing and happenstance and all of those sorts of things. So this was winter in 2004, January 2005, and in April of 2005, ESPN launches ESPNU for the first time. They're all college-based network. At the time, the guy who's heading up ESPNU goes to my boss and says, "Hey, listen, all college-based network. I know that you're getting the thing up and running on ESPN.com for recruiting, and then we feel like on the network side of it, we need to have a tie-in between recruiting to a college-based network." Makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he goes, "All right, well, do you have a guy that could do television? Maybe more than one, maybe a couple of guys that you're using for scouting." Well, it turns out that ended up being me and Todd McShay. because Todd and I were doing the exact same thing for Scouts Inc. at the exact same time. So
Mm.
he comes over and he ends up doing what he developed into over 15, 17 years, and that was player personnel, pre-draft and draft evaluation stuff. I did the same thing. I just went towards the high school side. And then he and I were the first two analysts on ESPNU at the time. And so that's how I felt. I fell on TV totally by accident, completely by accident. And long story short, almost 21 years later, really have just developed into college football analysis, still doing the recruiting analysis. Uh, had a role for a while on ABC as a sideline analyst, doing analysis from the field. Um, I've done the booth stuff, I've done the interview stuff and the studio stuff, and still doing it to this day. And that part literally was all, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, self-made, because there was never intention for me to get in the climate that I'm in now.
Yeah. Okay. So what's thinking about your whole journey, right? What's a lesson that you learned that someone watching can learn from what you've experienced?
Um, Try to slow down and not chase. And I felt like I did that a little bit when I was in Dallas. And I look back even to this day, and I don't have any regrets over the last 20 years, but I know for a fact that had I just stayed there, I'd probably still be working there in probably a very high capacity role. I had a great relationship with Stephen and Jerry Jones, Shy Anderson, Jerry Jones Jr. And quite honestly, that's what Will McClay did.
Hmm.
And shoot, kudos to him. What a great move. He's created stability. He's probably created quite a bit of wealth. I was I was in a position where I loved the challenge of either building a franchise or turning one around. And I probably didn't realize the doors it could have opened if I would have just kept myself where my feet were. Right.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be ambitious. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't want to grow. And, because I was very outside of the New York situation. All of my job changes have come because of success, not getting fired. Right. And
Hmm.
so you want to be able to grow and take on bigger jobs and bigger roles, and that's all important. But I also think there's a time and a place to sit back and say, you know what, this is a pretty good gig. And I know if I do a good job, not only on the Desperado side, but I do a good job during the off season and I'm working in personnel on the Cowboys side, I could work myself into a heck of a long-term gig. And that's not to say I regret taking the Detroit situation, but just not chasing and kind of being where your feet are.
Hmm. All right. And so what, based on your experiences and looking back at it now, what about for a young player, maybe coming out of college, that's like looking at things like, should I give arena a try? Should I continue playing, or should I just jump into the work field or whatever? What kind of advice would you give like a young player looking at things?
Well, I think it depends on how much you love the game. If you really love the game, play as long as God willing you're able to. Whether that's for $250 a week or that's for, $5,000 a week, whatever it may be and whatever opportunity there is, because that day is going to come for all of us, right? If you're somebody that likes the game but it's not passionate about playing anymore, but you want to be in the game, I think you got to make sure that you are well rounded, whether that's on the pro side or the college side. You can't just be an X's and O's guy. You can't just be a recruiting guy. You can't just be a personnel guy. I think you really got to dive into knowing all of it, right? And
Mhm.
and really educating yourself. If you're gonna be a GA for somebody in college and you want to get on into the coaching profession and you want to be on the field, you better be paying close attention to what those guys in the office across the hall are doing in personnel. Because
Mhm.
if you're going to be coaching those guys, you're going to want to have a say in, all right, how are we evaluating them? What are we looking for? How are we, all of those sorts of things. You're going to become a better coach as a result. And you put yourself into a better position to have more job opportunities if you can do both. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was my thing with that first gig at Tennessee Valley when I was 25. Like, and I actually have done this in my broadcasting career. It was, all right, how many jobs can I do and figure out how to do the job to the best of my ability that gives me the greatest work experience to continue to help me get further jobs. So if I'm sitting there and I've got a resume and I've been the quarterback's coach, the receivers coach, the coordinator, the head coach, the director of player personnel, I've had to hire all of our staff. I've had to put together all of our day-to-day schedule. I've had to do all of this stuff. I'm 25 years old. Another job comes up 2 years later. I've got that on my resume, and I'm up against 3 or 4 other guys, and they've all either been a position coach or they've been an assistant to a position coach or this and that. Guess who's getting the job, right? And so I really made it a point to dive into all of those sorts of things. I think that's important. I did that on the television side. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I never said no. So if somebody said, "Hey, Lugs, you think you could host this show for a half an hour and like come out of commercial breaks and get us to commercial breaks and learn all that stuff?" Like, yeah, sure. I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I knew I was going to figure it out because then I figured, okay, the more you can do, the more valuable you are, right? The harder it is for them to get rid of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've kind of always looked at it that way. I think that's how coaches should look at it too. And I will say this though, being involved in the college game the way I am now, like this is a whole different animal with name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal and pay for play. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of young guys that if they want to get into coaching, they're trying to go to professional football because they don't want to deal with all of this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Or instead of coaching at the college level, they're going in to personnel now because now in college you have personnel departments, you have a general manager, you have to have all of those things that when you and I played, you didn't have any of that, right? You had coaching staff, your recruiting coordinator was one of the coaches, and you might have had a
Yeah.
couple like students breaking down film, and that's what it was, right? And so now you're seeing a lot of these guys think long and hard because man, it's a hard profession as it is. But like if you're not at an Alabama or an Ohio State or a Georgia or a Texas and coaching in college football right now, it ain't for everybody. I can tell you that.
I tried 1 year of that, and this was before all the stuff that you're able to do now. I was at St. Joseph's College in Indiana, $100 a week. I stayed in the dorm with the players,
Yep.
80 hours a week. We had meetings in the morning, then watching film, calling recruits, all that stuff. And that's like after 1 year of that, I'm like, that's when I ended up going to the Deuce. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to continue this football journey, see how long I can play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it worked out for you, man.
It definitely worked out, but at that 1 year of college, was like, you know what? This ain't for me.
It's hard, man. It is a grind. It is.
So appreciate you coming on and talking ball with me. I don't want to
Yeah.
hold you up too long. I know you got stuff to do, but I definitely appreciate you coming on and kind of catching up. We haven't talked in a
Yeah.
very long time.
Yeah, I love it, man. I appreciate you reaching out to me and your patience with my schedule and everything. But it's always good to kind of talk those days. Like you, before we came on, you mentioned Mike Trigg. I was like, God, I haven't heard that name in a while. And then you start thinking of guys like Tim Markham and the late Fran Popsidero.
Yes.
You got all, Clint Dolzell. You start thinking of all of these guys that, Kurt Warner and those guys and Aaron Garcia and all of these dudes that kind of made the league what it is. And I just it sucks that the league that what the sport turned into at the height of the sport was so good,
Mm-hmm.
and then it all came crumbling down.
Yep.
And that's a bummer. That's a
Yep.
bummer. But it's always good to rehash these names and talk those times.
Definitely. All we got is these stories, and that's kind of the purpose of this podcast. I get guys on, share stories that no one knows, and
Yeah.
and reminisce, and all
Oh
of us can
man.
sit back and watch. Oh man, it's Garcia. Oh man, I remember this.
Yeah, man. It's great, isn't it? Good
Yes, yes.
times.
So,
All
all
right, man.
right, appreciate you. Good luck with everything, and let's stay in touch.
All right, will do, man. Appreciate you having
All
me.
right,
See ya.
appreciate you. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye.